Good afternoon. This is Dyke Hendrickson, and this is the podcast Life Along the Merrimack. Each Tuesday, we talk about the Merrimack River, the history, the health, and sometimes we talk about the Coast Guard. The Coast Guard was founded on the Merrimack River in 1790, and sometimes we are engaged in talking about that. Today is going to be a little unusual. I wrote a book recently called New England Coast Guard Stories, Remarkable Mariners. I'm writing a book now called Merrimack, the Resilient River. And I'm going to share with you some of my photos that are going to be in the book. They're not quite in PowerPoint. Well, not quite, not at all in PowerPoint. But I will do it anyway. The photos are great. They really are. I'm writing a book partly because I love the river, partly because I love the history of the river, and partly because the river is getting dirtier, not cleaner. And so the book is going to be a call to action, like let's do everything we can to make this a vibrant and healthy river. So I'm going to show I have 90 slides, but don't worry, you won't be seeing them all today. One of the first slides in the book is going to be of the river. Now this was taken by a drone overlooking the Merrimack. You can see Salisbury on the right, Newburyport on the left. It was taken by a drone run by a photographer and photo guru named Ethan Cohen. He lives in town. Isn't this a beautiful river though? On the right is the marsh and the wetlands. It's the largest on the East Coast north of New Jersey, 25,000 square acres. And on the left is Newburyport. In summer, there are close to 1,500 boats on the river in Newburyport, in Salisbury. So this is a great photo of the Merrimack River. Fishing boats still exist in Newburyport. There aren't many of them. There used to be hundreds, 2 centuries ago. Now there are just a few. But the Merrimack is a versatile river, and here are some of the fishing boats. Several things happened with the fish. Some of them were fished out, not really by New England fishermen, but by those huge factory trawlers by the Japanese, the Norwegians, the Russians. And also, the federal government has put limits on how many fish you can take, and this has made it difficult for local fishermen. So in an orientation of the river, here is the river as it looks in Lowell. It's, of course, in Newburyport, it's vibrant with many boats and recreational uses. In Lawrence, we kind of look at the past. Lawrence was an enormous mill community. You can see some of the mills here. It's trying to reinvent itself. In fact, to the right in the center of the photo, you can see a parking lot is going up. So Lawrence is making a comeback. I started to say Lowell. Lowell has already made a comeback. But here's a picture of the river in Lawrence, and it's only several feet deep here. Now, on the other side of the scale, far up in Franklin, New Hampshire, the Merrimack River is quite vibrant. Here's some whitewater. The river starts in Franklin, New Hampshire, which is 117 miles from Newburyport. And as you can see, it has a much different character. Kayakers come, canoeists come, fishermen come. It's really, much of it north of Manchester, New Hampshire is still quite unspoiled. But I really like this photo because it gives you a different sense of the Merrimack River. One of the exciting things that happened last year were, more than a dozen kayakers calling themselves the Voyagers kayaked 117 miles down the river from Franklin, New Hampshire to Plum Island. And here's a picture of some of them. It was taken in Haverhill, and I've talked to many of them. It was a big task. I mean, they go at it 8 or 10 hours a day, and then they have to find place to sleep that night. They had originally planned to camp out, either in a public park or a public use area, but it rained very hard several nights. So I write about these people in my book, but believe me, it was hard work. If it's good once, it's good twice. Now, most of my book is going to be about the goodness of the river, but we also have challenges. And again, one of the river's reasons I'm doing the book is to bring attention to the fact that sometimes it's getting dirtier before it gets cleaner. Here's a pipe in Methuen. All communities have pipes like this. One reason things are getting worse in the Merrimack are combined sewage overflows. That means a sewage treatment plant will get a big rainstorm. The sewage and the rainwater goes into the same holding facility, and it becomes overwhelmed because rains are fast and furious these days from climate change. This is not, so CSOs are very bad. That's what we're fighting. We're also fighting just, poor care of the river. And here, this is where overflow from rainwater, not from a sewage treatment plant, but from rain or the community, that puts a lot of bad materials in. Also, these look like shopping carts that people foolishly put in. So part of the book is going to be about how we can do a better job in keeping the river clean. But the river is a beautiful thing. And here's a photographer named Brian Eaton with the Daily News in Newburyport took this. I mean, this is a wonderful photo seeing the great recreational uses of the river. There's boating, there's fishing, people just having a good time in the evening. So Brian really did a wonderful job on this photo. Now, many years ago, starting in the 1820s, Henry David Thoreau took a canoe trip up the river. This is Thoreau. He wrote a book called A Week on the Concord and Merrimack Rivers. He wrote it in 1839. It was published in 1849. But he was at that time expressing concern that the mills were being built in Lowell. And mills started being built in Lowell on the riverbank in about 1823. So when he got there in 1839, there was a lot of rivers. There were dams, there were dikes, if I can use a term. There were new canals. It made it very difficult for the fish and for wildlife. And even back then in 1839, he said, he said it much more in a more clever way. He said, well, this is bad. If the fish can wait about 1,000 years for these mills to go through their motions and then go away, I think they can get back upstream and spawn and be good again. Of course, that never happened. Pollution was significant. The fish did not get upriver. Some get upriver now through fishways. But Thoreau was an early critic of building mills which dump pollution into the Merrimack River. There are a lot of things to love about the Merrimack River. In recent years, since 1972, it has gotten cleaner in large part, and that has brought back the eagles. Now, here is an eagle looking surfeited upon eating a fish, and this was taken by Brian Eaton also, but there are many eagles on the Merrimack River now, and I should say the river's getting dirtier, yes, but it's better than it was, and that is because there was a federal legislation in 1972 called the Clean Water Act. Senator Ed Muskie of Maine was a leader in passing that. The water has become much cleaner since 1972. And partly for that reason, there are more birds, more fish, and in general, things are getting better, even if we're sliding with these CSOs that I mentioned. The river can be a beautiful place, even in urban areas. This is Methuen, up the river. There's a sailboat on the river. It's a beautiful spot. And in many communities, there's good recreation to be had on the river. Here's a photo that shows us some of the size and majesty of the river. This is looking towards the west, and it just shows the river, a beautiful spot in early fall. Of course, the river has had difficult moments, and this does make it look 19th century, late 19th century spigot river. There were many mills. You can't see the fact that it's dirty, but it does kind of look dirty. And there's a railroad line, which is essentially moved materials in and out of places like Lowell, Lawrence, and Haverhill. But this is a wonderful photo from the late 19th century. One of the great elements of the past is a lot of buildings were constructed and a lot of brick was used, as you can see. My book is about the river, but someday I vow to myself, I'm going to write a book about brick making. Because I mean, if you've ever been, excuse me, in Lowell or Lawrence, you know there's a lot of bricks out there, but that's what part of Lowell looks like now. And again, people are trying to make it cleaner. There's a water utility that tries to make water cleaner, make it available for drinking, and in general, keep that river healthy. Now, one of the other reasons, just other than we like to have recreation on the river, another reason to keep it clean is that close to 500,000 people get their drinking water in Lawrence and North Andover, in that area. There are many thousands of people get their drinking water. So the water is clean, and it's reportedly pretty good. But, you know, there's always a chance that something could go wrong, and it would be nice to have a clean river. This just shows, you know, how life can be good on the Merrimack. Across the river is part of Mordzy State Park. This is taken from Amesbury, showing some boats, showing some beautiful, not foliage, but beautiful trees and forests behind. And of course, the river looks very beautiful there. Here's another shot of the Newburyport Harbor. It has many uses. Of course, some people, excuse me, like sailboats and motorboats, as you can see. Here is what they used to call a cigarette boat. And of course, there is the Whittier Bridge in the background being open so that a vessel with a high mast can get through. Here's another photo of the river, just showing how beautiful it is, going east rather than west when we opened. This is a gorgeous shot. Newburyport's on the right. You can see parts of Salisbury on the left. And of course, Plum Island, excuse me, is out in the distance. Fishing boats are ready to go out at all times. Here, it appeared a storm was coming up, but I took this photo just before a big rainstorm. About half of the photos in the book will be mine. I spent a lot of time running around. Part of the book will be history. This is a photo of showing Newburyport in about 1852. It was done by Rich Jones, who is a great artist, as you can see. He's also the city clerk of Newburyport. But you can see how large the vessels were. They're larger than some buildings, and they went all over the world. Hundreds were built each year, and thousands over a period of time. Here is one of the last of the large wooden vessels that was built in Newburyport. It was a Symington, and it was built in about 1893. It's taking a moment to get up here. And you can see the crowds around it. It was more than 300 feet long and quite a sight. Another famous shot is the way that people used to love to go on the river. In the late 19th century and early 20th century, most people did not have their own cars. They did not have their own boats. So the idea of taking a trolley down to the river was quite exciting. And this is about 1910 or so. And you can just see how many people were lining up to have a nice boat trip on the river. Of course, we still do have boats on the river, and that would include whale watches, small vessels going up the river. So it's still an active avocation. Here's a photo from Cashman Park. Cashman Park is the most active boat launch, public boat launch in the state. There are hundreds of boats that go in each week, and it's a beautiful spot down along the river. In recent years, a number of riverfront parks have been improved and really made very pleasant. Here's Joppa Park. I think it was refashioned in 1971. You can see, the flowers, the bullards, the many boats in the background. It's a beautiful spot. The Coast Guard was founded in Newburyport in 1790. Here are a few Coast Guard vessels on the Merrimack, and each summer they're called upon to, rescue fishermen, rescue boaters, rescue all sorts of people. The Merrimack's a difficult river, especially for amateurs, so sometimes boats go over in the mouth of the river. The current of the Merrimack is very strong. Meanwhile, the tide from the Atlantic can be strong, and so if the current coming from the west is meeting the tides coming from the east, it can be very choppy. In addition, it's shallow. In addition to that, it usually has sandbars that turn up. So it's a tough place, and the Coast Guard is frequently called into action. This is a famous site in Salisbury Beach, Ben Butler's Toothpick. It's basically, this is a postcard. It's a navigation site on the river on the Salisbury side. Ben Butler was a Civil War general for the North. He was the governor of Massachusetts after the Civil War, and he settled in Newburyport for a while. So Ben Butler's Toothpick was named after his illustrious career, and many boaters know it. Here's another postcard from the old days. These are the arcades of Salisbury, and you can see that this postcard is somewhat dated. It looks like, the 30s or early 40s. But then and as now, many people would visit Salisbury Beach, and there had a lot of amusements, as you folks probably know. And here's the Great Bridge, the Great Beach. Isn't that beautiful? This is in the winter, and I think many people on the North Shore have really enjoyed Salisbury Beach. The Whittier Bridge is relatively new. It was finished several years ago, $292 million. It crosses, it touches Newburyport and Amesbury, and was one of the largest federal projects in this area. But as you certainly know, it's very valuable. When we talk about the fact that there's many beautiful spots still on the river, here's a nice spot upriver. It looks like winter, some beautiful birch trees, and so there's still much natural beauty to be had. In Amesbury, I think this is one of the beautiful shots from Amesbury. This is looking west. This is near Lowell's Boat Shop. I suspect Lowell's Boat Shop actually built those vessels. And in the background, there's some of Amesbury's pretty houses on Main Street. Here is John Greenleaf Whittier, one of the great poets. He wrote a long poem called "Oh Merrimack," which I'm using the entire thing in my book. And here is a good photo, which A, shows you the beauty, but B, reminds us of our local geography. This is near the Amesbury-Merrimack line, as you can tell. Moving upriver a little bit, the city of Haverhill is making quite a comeback. New buildings are going up. A branch of the University of Massachusetts is going up there. Banks have started there. So Haverhill in recent decades has made a significant comeback from its mill days. And it is one of the communities that is improving as we speak. This is another shot which shows you some of the building going on in Haverhill, one of the older bridges, but there are newer buildings. University of Massachusetts is the one in the middle. And it's a community that is changing quickly, and it's using the river as kind of the centerpiece for the improvements it's trying to make. In Haverhill, there's a fellow that has kind of his own cleanup group. His name is Rocky Morrison, and he's in the stern of the boat here. I just took this photo as I was walking across the bridge. They go up and down the river, cleaning the river, not from CSO effluent, but from bicycles in the river, tires in the river, supermarket carts in the river. So it's not a government agency. He has to work hard to get donations from communities, but his work is very valuable, and it's important. Here in Newburyport is a pipe that lets rainwater into the river. Now this is down right next to beyond the Black Cow, and it's a new Tuscan restaurant. And over here, under the nice flowers, is the boardwalk. But this, as you can see, is a drainage pipe. Again, it doesn't come from the sewage treatment plant. It comes from, the streets collect water. As you know, there's a downhill tilt from the high school going all the way down. But this is an example. Someday, perhaps we'll be able to route all the runoff from streets. But right now, much of it goes into the river. And there's gas, there's oil, there's debris. It's something that should be avoided if possible. In Lowell, incidentally, there's a wonderful boat tour, not this year because of the COVID, but Lowell had a national park commissioned in 1978, and they've done a great job on the history of the river, the history of the mill system, and you can get on a vessel that takes you all through the canals and locks and rivers in Lowell. So it's really worth doing. This is, you wouldn't know it necessarily, but this is in Lawrence, a beautiful part of Lawrence. At the very top of this photo is the Lawrence Boat Club. So even in communities that are a little down on their luck in terms of the industrial area, there are many areas of Lawrence that are very beautiful. Now here's kind of what Henry David Thoreau must have been talking about. When the mills came in, they dammed the water, the river, so that they could release it at any time they wanted to, so they could, when they had their shifts on, the hydropower would enable the mills to create energy. But you can see how impossible it would be for a fish to jump over that and start heading for New Hampshire. There has been work on creating fishways, but there are dozens and dozens of dams and stoppages on the Merrimack River. And so in the future, I think people will be determining if they can get rid of some of them. Not that one, that's quite central, but we'll see what can happen. This is an interesting shot. This is in Manchester, New Hampshire in about 1936. There was a great flood in New England in 1936. And this was the Merrimack, and certainly it shows the power and danger of it. The Ameskeag Manufacturing Company, their mills are to the left, and you can imagine how damaging that was. But in terms of a river overpowering a small town. That is certainly a very incredible photo. And I'm going to move forward. This is one of my favorite discussions is the Clean Water Act of 1972, which changed everything, cleaned the river, and enabled all these communities, including Newburyport, to make a comeback. It was very dirty, as we've said. Ed Muskie from Maine pioneered and helped pass the Clean Water Act of 1972. His wife, Jane Muskie, is right over his shoulder. And so he worked very hard to get that done. It was very valuable. Again, here's a pretty picture of how life can be good. I think this came from the Voyagers. These are the kayaks they used, and they came down the whole 117 miles. This is a wonderful shot by Dan Grovak, who was one of the Voyagers. Here's an eagle. It seemed like he'd look a little happier. I mean, he just had a nice meal. He seems a little cross, but I suppose eagles are like that. Here's one of my favorite people, Senator George Mitchell. He was also from Maine. And in 1987, he was very valuable in keeping the Clean Water Act of 1972 alive. And what happened was President Reagan in 1987 wanted to get rid of all funding for the Environmental Protection Agency. He just wanted to stop all grants to communities. But Mitchell and others were able to have they're called the 1987 amendments. And there weren't any more grants after that, but communities could get low-cost loans. So that's what we have now. Not many grants for sewage treatment plants, but there are low-interest loans. So I'm going to finish up now. As I say, I have more slides than I know what to do with. But here's one of my favorites. It shows the bridge. It's sunset. Dan Gravik of Plum Island took this. He's actually letting me have 12 of his very wonderful photos, but isn't this beautiful? The Merrimack River at sunset. So that will be in the book. And here's one that I kind of liked. This is in Lowell, but it recognizes the many women who work very hard in the mills, and that is not coming up very well. I think I'll try for something a little easier. Well, just when you thought you'd seen everything on the Merrimack, the kayaker was above Manchester, and they saw many cows in the river. Now, if you're a purist, you could say, geez, cows probably make the river very dirty. You know, they eliminate there and whatever, but this is an incredible photo of the Merrimack River in a rural area hosting, several score of cattle. Very surprising, but the Merrimack is surprising. Well, that's it for me. It's about 2:30. This is Life Along the Merrimack. I'm Dyke Hendrickson. I'll be back next week. I'm writing a book called Merrimack, the Resilient River, and these are some of the shots from that book. So thank you very much for being with us. We'll be back next week, and have a good week and keep the river clean.